Archaic Records.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Archaic Records here with you again. My name is Jamie, coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee. And it's nice to be back with you after a couple of weeks off. I decided to indulge in a little bit of a social media break. I feel as if it is important from time to time to take a step back and allow ourselves a little bit of a mental health hiatus. It's obvious that I'm not exactly needed here. So I thought to myself, you know what? No harm, no foul. That being said, I am excited and energized to be back with you here on Archaic Records. Here to wish you a very happy Morrissey Monday, a celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths. And for this week's episode, we're going to go back to September 23rd of 2024. Take a quick look at the Johnny Marr show at the Warfield in San Francisco, California. A show that I was fortunate enough to be in attendance at. My wife and I traveled out to San Francisco on Monday, September 23rd. Now, traveling on the day of a show, especially traveling, a great distance, isn't necessarily something that I love, but it was just the way that our schedules sort of fell into place regarding our job. So that was just something that we had to work around. But we did leave Nashville super early on Monday morning. I think we flew out of Nashville at around 5 a.m. We landed in California at around 10:30. Now, we flew into Sacramento, California. We picked up our rental car and immediately skedaddled it into the Bay Area. I think we had arrived in San Francisco proper by around 12:30, which gave us plenty of time to kick around town before we had to head downtown to the show. And I got to tell you that it is always so much fun being back in San Francisco. It is so great to put my feet back down on my native soil. Now, it's become popular and trendy throughout other parts of the United States, at least out here in Tennessee, over the past few years, for people who, I get the sense, aren't necessarily experts on the subject, to accuse San Francisco of being a shithole. And whenever people say that to me, and that's something that you hear a lot out here in this part of the country, it always sort of makes me bristle because of my sort of Bay Area status. I tend to get a little bit defensive when people take shots at San Francisco, Oakland, and Berkeley, and I can't help but ask people every time they make that observation, well, when was the last time you were in San Francisco? And inevitably, 8, 9, 10 out of 10 times, people say, oh, never! And you just kind of want to tell people to stick it up their poop hole. You obviously have no idea what you're talking about, son. Anyway, we got into San Francisco proper at probably about 12:30 in the afternoon. And as is our ritual, my wife and I immediately hightailed it out to the Haight-Ashbury, which is easily my favorite neighborhood in San Francisco. Now, pretty much all the neighborhoods in San Francisco are my favorite, but the Haight-Ashbury reigns supreme as far as I'm concerned. And my wife had an appointment that she had made that was going to take her probably an hour and a half or 2 hours, which gave me some time to pursue my own interests. And whenever I'm in the Haight-Ashbury alone, there is one place that is my beck and call. That is the Holy Church. Now, you can have the world's most famous rodent, and you can stick his theme park right up your patootie, because as far as I'm concerned, the happiest place in the world is Amoeba Records in both San Francisco and Berkeley. Now, the one in San Francisco in particular, I would consider to be the Holy Church. And seeing as my wife had this appointment that was going to occupy a couple hours of her time, I was allowed the freedom to weave up and down the aisles of Amoeba Records uninterrupted. And I can tell you that for most of the time I was in there, I was sporting some fairly substantial chubbage, because that is the greatest record store that I have ever been in. Now, I'm biased because it's in San Francisco, I admit that. But if you ever have an opportunity to go to San Francisco and visit the Haight-Ashbury and you are in the record collecting community, you absolutely have to check out Amoeba Records. That is a necessity in your life. So if you do pay attention to Amoeba Records, at least on their social media outlets, they occasionally do this thing where they interview musicians who they spot shopping in their various locations, and they do these segments that are called What's in My Bag. So it's always been my dream to participate in the Amoeba Records What's in My Bag segment. So if you will indulge me for just a second, I'd like to share with you some of the morsels of snugness that I picked up on my most recent trip to Amoeba Records. First thing that's in my bag is a couple of albums by the same band. This is a band that is from San Francisco. Whenever I go into a city and there is a band from that city that I am a fan of, I like to find records of that band. I like to pick up records by bands in their hometown. Yes, I realize that I am probably the coolest person you've ever seen, but it is my burden to carry around. Anyway, this is a band that I am absolutely obsessed with. This is a band called Moon Duo from San Francisco, California. This is a copy of their first record. Now, I did have several of the band's records on vinyl before this trip to San Francisco, but there were a couple in particular that I was looking for, and this first record was the main one that was on my radar. This was a record that I had not previously... now, if you're unfamiliar with the band Moon Duo, this is a band that I just recently got turned on to, maybe 2 years ago. I have no idea how this band slid past me for so long, but this band is actually one of my current musical obsessions. This is a band from San Francisco. They sort of combine elements of indie with electronic and psychedelia. It's sort of a modern electronic take on the Summer of Love. Man, these guys are one of my current obsessions. I am definitely going to be bringing these guys onto the show very soon, as a matter of fact. I feel as if one of these episodes for Moon Duo is coming up very soon. Also picked up a copy of their album Mazes, which of these two records, I actually like the second record, Mazes, better. The first record is really good. The first record, I can't really find it on any of the streaming services, so I really want to have that record on physical format. That band is my current obsession. So if you are unfamiliar with the band Moon Duo, you got to check those guys out. I can't possibly recommend them enough. Another record that I picked up on my trip to Amoeba this time was a band called Of Montreal. I am a huge Of Montreal fan. I'm sure that a lot of people out there who may pay attention to this channel are also fans of Montreal, a band, of course, from Athens, Georgia. This is their album, The Gay Parade. This is just one that I happen to not have on vinyl before this particular trip to San Francisco. Not my favorite record of Montreal's, but I am a huge fan of theirs. I need to bring them to the channel as well. And probably the crown prince of my morsels of snugness when it comes to this particular trip to Amoeba Records in San Francisco. This is a record that I have been looking for many, many years on vinyl. The band is Benet. This is a band that I first got turned on to back in probably the mid to late 1990s. This was a band that one of my friends that I used to work with, he and I were more than co-workers. We were really good friends, but he turned me on to so many bands that I was previously unfamiliar with, and this band is one that he turned me on to a long time ago. I had this record on CD, but I never had this record on vinyl. This album features the band's biggest hit, if you will, Mum Went to Iceland. I can't wait to do an episode on this record. This was one that I literally could not believe that I found on vinyl and out in the wild. So for me, this was the crowning prince of my finds at Amoeba Records on this particular trip. I also picked up a few copies. One of my favorite things about the Amoeba Records, at least the one in San Francisco, is they have these bins full of back-issued music magazines. So I found a few featuring the big guy, Mr. Stephen Patrick Morrissey. This copy of Mojo, which features the Smiths, an uncut. Another one featuring the Smiths. I have a huge collection of these magazines. In fact, one of these I already had. Sometimes I forget that I have these. I forget which ones that I already own. So sometimes I purchase them, backup copies. But it's all good. This one also, which I did not have, from 2013, an issue of Uncut magazine featuring the big guy. This one is the 2013 year in review. It talks a lot about Morrissey's autobiography and, as he calls it, his extremely weird 2013. And what's interesting to me about this particular issue of Uncut, which I did not have before the strip, and the one reason why I love buying these magazines is because they are collector pieces and they make good library archive pieces. But especially when I'm out traveling and I'm staying in a hotel room, I'm always looking for something to read. So I was able to knock out all of these articles during our trip out to California. But one thing that's interesting about this particular copy of Uncut magazine from 2013 is that Morrissey is named their Man of the Year, which, not saying that I disagree with or ever disagree with, but I think you'd be hard-pressed in today's day and age to find any music periodical that would have the onions to sort of bestow that honor on Morrissey nowadays, considering we live in the age of cancel culture, and all of these periodicals, these mainstream periodicals at least, sort of live in fear of the kind of woke, mafia. Anyway, after a couple of hours perusing around Amoeba Records in San Francisco, my wife and I met back up after the appointment that she had attended, and we had to head downtown to the Warfield to check out the Johnny Marr and James show. Now, if you haven't been to the Warfield in San Francisco, it is a cool venue. It's not necessarily my favorite venue of all time. When this show was announced for San Francisco, I was hoping that it was going to be at the Fillmore. The Fillmore is my all-time favorite music venue. It's just the perfect size. It's historic. It sounds unbelievable. If I had to pick a top three music venues of all time, at least ones that I've been to, the Fillmore is number one, easily, hands down. I mean, if I have to go, if I'm on death row, and you get, how death row inmates get their last meal. If I'm on death row and I'm granted a last show, I'm going to the Fillmore. That is the greatest music venue of all time. You could spend hours just walking around the poster room, geeking out on all of the artists that have played there. My second favorite music venue is a place called Turner Hall, which is up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's very similar to the Fillmore, at least in size and sound. I think that's just sort of my favorite size venue. My third favorite venue would be the one here in Nashville, which is the Ryman Auditorium, which you just walk in the doors of that place and the history just oozes on top of you. Now, I'm not really a country music guy, but just the history of the people that have played at the Ryman, including the big guy, Stephen Patrick Morrissey, Echo and the Bunnymen, bands like that. Devo just played here. So it isn't just all country. That's the thing I tell people about Nashville all the time. Now, I'm not a country music guy, and if you aren't a country music person, I'm standing with you in solidarity. But it's not all country music. You can go to the Ryman, which that place is the jugs, honestly. We're so lucky to have that place here in Nashville. There's actually, as you would probably imagine, they're awesome. A lot of awesome venues out here in Nashville. But none top the Ryman Auditorium. If you ever get a chance to visit Nashville, you have to check out the Ryman Auditorium. But as far as the Warfield goes, the Warfield is cool. It is a place that's very sentimental to me. It is a place that, it was the very first place that I ever saw Morrissey on the Maladjusted Tour on October 8th, 1997. In fact, in the Warfield lobby, there is a photograph of the first ever Morrissey show that I ever went to. So it's always a friendly reminder. It is a very sentimental venue for me in that sense. I think the first time that I ever went to the Warfield, I think it was in 1994, 1995. I know the first show that I ever saw at the Warfield, it might have been 1994. I think it was. I saw Danzig with Marilyn Manson and Korn. Now, at the time, I didn't even know who Korn was. And I still sort of wish that I didn't know who Korn was. Give up. But that was right around the time that Marilyn Manson was becoming popular, and I think it was on the Danzig 4 tour. Maybe it was the Danzig 3 tour. It was not long after Marilyn Manson had opened for Nine Inch Nails, and I remember I didn't go see the Marilyn Manson Nine Inch Nails show because I'm not really a big Nine Inch Nails fan. Sorry if you are, that's fine. But I'm not, and I really never have been. But I remember going to see Marilyn Manson after hearing all of the stories from my friends who had gone to see the Marilyn Manson Nine Inch Nails tour. And Marilyn Manson's show was fairly subdued as far as I was concerned. I later read that he wasn't able to pull out all of his antics that he had done with the Nine Inch Nails show because Glenn Danzig sort of put the kibosh on Marilyn Manson performing his entire stage show, which, if you know anything about Danzig, isn't surprising. I'm a Danzig fan. That show was good. I've seen Danzig several times over the year, but that was the first time I ever went to the Warfield. But the thing about the Warfield is, if you're down low on the floor, I think that you're in pretty good shape because the floor is very wonky at the Warfield. The floor, there's a balcony that hangs down over the floor, and the balcony comes way out. So if you're on the very front part of the floor, you're okay. Otherwise, if you're sort of in the back 2/3 of the floor, you sort of have this balcony overhang, which is, I find it to be sort of distracting. So I would make the argument that unless you are very close on the floor, right near the stage, you're almost better off up in the balcony at the Warfield than you are standing back on the floor. Now, I don't normally say that. I'm normally a floor guy, but at the Warfield in particular, just because the floor is so wonky, I don't really love the way the floor is set up. You're almost better being up in the balcony. And I've only been in the balcony at the Warfield once, but I thought it was somewhat enjoyable. But we got down to the Warfield. The place is awesome. It's right on Market Street, not too far from where the Powell Street BART stop is. We got in there, and my wife and I were running slightly late because we had had dinner with one of our friends in San Francisco after we left the Haight-Ashbury. We stopped off at this place called the Zeitgeist, which is in the Mission District, which is sort of a throwback to me to old San Francisco, or to what I think of as San Francisco, because San Francisco nowadays, because of the sort of lack of cultural diversity in San Francisco, it's become somewhat bland and uninteresting culturally, which is something I never thought I would say about San Francisco. But because San Francisco is so expensive and really only allows one sort of demographic of people to live there, which happen to be what I think, in my opinion, are these sort of overpriced, tech bros. A lot of the interesting things in San Francisco, at least interesting in my opinion, have sort of closed up shop and moved on. But this place, Zeitgeist, is sort of a throwback. It's this sort of scuzzy, punk rock, kind of divey. Yeah, it's sort of a designer dive bar, but you can get cheap beer and they have food there. And they have this really awesome outdoor back patio. The day we were in San Francisco on Monday, it was actually hot. Now, talking about the weather doesn't necessarily pump my nads, but we got to San Francisco and it was 90 degrees in the city, which never happens. I mean, 70 degrees in San Francisco is hot, but 90 degrees is insane. Anyway, so we headed down to the show. We got down there. We were running a little bit late, so we got in there, got into our spots, felt pretty good about where we were standing on the floor, and James came out. They opened up the show. Now, my wife and I we always sort of joke that we are magnets for the worst individuals at every show we go to. Now, we got to the show. Now, admittedly, we were running a little bit behind, but we got to a place on the floor where we felt relatively secure. It wasn't necessarily as close as we wanted to be, but we felt pretty good about our real estate, if you know what I mean. And of course, as soon as the show starts, this socially awkward, to put it nicely, 8-foot tall, techie gentleman comes and stands right in front of me. And I get the sense that this guy had been doing some pretty serious snowshoeing before he got to the show, because this guy was Cocaine Johnson. He was giving off some crazy mass shooter vibes. He was antsy. He was agitated. And I was not enjoying his company, to be perfectly honest with you. But what can you do? You're there. You're at the show. You're there to see the band. Of course, this guy had his phone up the whole time, right in my face, too. Thanks a lot, son. Anyway, the band James came out. I am a big fan of the band James. I first discovered this band probably back in 1993, 1994, when I first saw the video for their single Laid on MTV, which I realize is probably a pretty generic way of getting turned on to the band James. But what can I tell you, man? I grew up in a small town. We didn't exactly have our fingers on the pulse of the musical underground, and MTV is what I relied on as part of my musical education. I first saw James live probably back in 1996, maybe 1997. It was long enough ago that Tim Booth still had hair. But I do remember when I saw the band live back in the 1990s. They were awesome. They came out on stage. Of course, this is a band, James, also, that has a long history with the Smiths and Johnny Marr, and they came out on stage. And I am a fan. I'm not necessarily the world's biggest expert on the band, James, but they were awesome. I thought that they sounded great. Now, if I had one minor quibble about the band James and their live show, it is that this band just has too many people on stage. That's something that I get sort of picky about. Now, if you're doing a style of music like Jamaican music or something like that, those types of artists tend to have a lot of different musicians on stage because there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of different instrumentation. Everybody is sort of pulling their own weight. But when you're playing relatively straightforward Brit-pop, Brit hippie pop, in the case of James, you don't need 4 guitar players. You don't need 2 drummers. It's just something that it is a minor quibble. I realize that I'm probably being petty in saying this, but I find it to be distracting. There was just too many people on stage. They had like 4 guitar players. They had 2 drummers. And the 2 drummer thing, I always find to be a little bit uncomfortable. Now, if the 2 drummers are, playing different rhythms and they're doing something different from each other, it's a little bit more understandable. But as far as I could tell, both the drummers were basically playing along to the same beat. It seemed a little bit unnecessary. It gave their show aesthetically sort of a sloppy look. People were just kind of milling around. Now, my wife loved James. She thought that they were awesome. She was not necessarily super familiar with the band before seeing them live. She is a lot more of sort of a hippie than I am. She definitely dug their hippie vibe. That's one thing I will give the band credit for. Tim Booth in particular, who, if you like his voice, now I've heard some people say over the years that they don't particularly like Tim Booth's voice. I love his voice. His voice is great live. And one thing I will say about Tim Booth, and I mean this as a compliment, is the guy is genuinely just a weirdo hippie. I mean, you can just tell that this guy lives love, peace, and happiness. Now, I would make the accusation that a lot of people in this world who sort of, consider themselves or identify themselves as being hippies are sometimes phony. They aren't always what they project, but I get the sense with Tim Booth that he is definitely what he projects. He is definitely the real deal. I thought James were awesome. They plowed through their set. There were some songs I recognized. There were some songs that I didn't recognize in reference to how many members the band have on stage. Tim Booth himself even joked about it, saying that a lot of bands hate working with James because of how long it takes for them to do their stage setup and breakdown. Like I said, that was just a real sort of minor quibble. For me, it was the same thing when I went to go see David Bowie. I mean, my second favorite artist of all time. He had like 12 people on stage. I remember the whole time thinking to myself, you don't need 4 guitarists, Dave. Anyway, James finished up. I thought that their show was awesome. They got a great response from the crowd. I was sort of happy that they played first. I thought it was, I thought it was appropriate, I should say, that Johnny Marr closed out the show. But after what actually turned out to be a pretty quick stage change, considering the fact that Tim Booth had joked about it, Johnny Marr and his band came out, and I thought that they were absolutely incredible. Now, of course, I am biased. I think that Johnny Marr is the greatest guitar player of all time. Now, that me saying that to you may induce eye rolls and perhaps a dismissive snicker, but I've said this before. I'll say it again. I don't really have any interest or use for the guitar stylings of people like, Eddie Van Halen, Yngwie Malmsteen, Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, that type of stuff is of little interest to me at all. And if that is something that you are interested in musically, then you and I have nothing in common. Virtually nothing in common. But Johnny Marr came out. I was very curious to see what his set list was going to be like. I was curious to see how much of the Smiths material he incorporated. I was curious to see if he was going to incorporate any music from any of his other projects besides his solo records and the Smiths, such as electronic. Now, I did a pretty good job. I always try to do this, where I sort of stay ignorant. I stay away from trying to, sort of peruse the set lists online before I get to a show. I kind of like to go in blind, not knowing what's going to happen. But he came out. He and his band looked great. I mean, Johnny Marr, when you see him in person, he is just a little tiny fella. He looks like he could fit in your pocket. Not that Morrissey is necessarily a monster, mind you, but Morrissey is a more average-sized man. I mean, in terms of musician standards, I think Morrissey is considered to be relatively tall, being 6'1", but Johnny Marr is just a little tiny person when you see him in the flesh. It always is striking to me what a little tiny guy he is. But they came out, and the first song that they went into was a Johnny Marr song called Sensory Street. This is a song that I love. This is, I've talked about this in the past. I really love Johnny Marr's solo material, going all the way back to the Boom Slang Healers record, although the Boom Slang is probably my least favorite of Johnny Marr's solo material. But I love the song Sensory Street. After that, he went into his first Smith song, which was Panic, which I thought was awesome. One thing that is so cool about seeing Johnny Marr live, especially if you are a Smiths wonk like I am, is hearing these songs on the guitar the way they were meant to be played. Now, I've seen Morrissey a dozen times over the years. He's always busted out Smith's material. I'm always very grateful when he does. But the one thing that I have to say when you see Morrissey live and he plays his Smith's material, regardless of who's in his band, even if it is the classic Morrissey lineup, which is my second favorite band of all time, with Alan White, Boz Bohr, Gary Day, and Spencer Coburn. When it comes to the guitar work, when Morrissey solo plays those Smith songs, it just always sounds just a tad bit off, because Johnny Marr is one of those guitarists that is so unique, has such an interesting style. I mean, he's one of those people that is often imitated, never duplicated. He's one of the most influential guitarists of all time. But to hear him play those Smith songs pretty much exactly the way they sound on record, it is awe-inspiring. Now, on the flip side of that, my main argument when it comes to Johnny Marr playing the Smiths material, which I love hearing these songs. I am one of the world's biggest Smiths fans, I would argue, and I love Johnny Marr's voice. Don't get me wrong. I think that Johnny Marr has a great voice. I love his voice on his records, but Johnny Marr's voice isn't necessarily, oozing with individuality. It isn't, dripping with character. He has sort of in every voice. Now, it's a good voice, and I'm not saying that to throw rocks, because I love his voice, but it just is not Morrissey. I mean, Morrissey has the greatest voice and the most unique voice in the history of rock and roll. I'm not asking you to agree with me. It's just factual. You don't have to agree with facts, you understand? So when you hear Johnny Marr sing the Smith songs, despite the fact that his guitar work is just impeccable, and the Warfield, as much as I don't love the layout of the floor, the Warfield sounds incredible, and this show sounded incredible. Both bands, James and Johnny Marr, both sounded incredible. The sound production was just the jugs. But hearing him sing the Smith songs, it just falls a little bit flat. Now, I would never say that on Johnny Marr's solo material, because I love his solo material, but just hearing anybody else sing those Smith songs, it's a tease, man. It's a tease. But I thought he did a good job on Panic, instrumentally especially. His band, instrumentally, too, are just tight, crisp, clean, a little nice, tight 4-piece band. Like I said before, when I was talking about James, you got 12 people milling around. It looks like a subway station during rush hour, but with the Johnny Marr band, it's a nice, clean, tight stage. It's got 4 people. They sounded awesome. The third song was Generate, Generate, another song that I really like a lot. Then he went into Spirit, Power, and Soul. Newtown, Velocity, both those songs were awesome. But after that, to me, was probably the high point of the entire show, which was they went into This Charming Man, which I've said this before on this channel, to me is a perfect song. Not necessarily my favorite song of all time, but it is a perfect song. It is a perfect 2.5, 3-minute post-punk pop song. There isn't an ounce of fat in that entire track. And I remember standing there in the audience at the Warfield, and as soon as he went into that guitar intro for This Charming Man, I literally felt my butthole drop open. It sounded perfect. It sounded record perfect. I couldn't believe that I was actually getting to hear Johnny Marr play that guitar intro to what is, again, not necessarily my favorite Smith song of all time, but a perfect song. A song I never get tired of. I've heard that song 1.5 million times. I never get tired of it. I don't think I've ever skipped that song one time. Hearing him play that instrumental track for This Charming Man was the highlight of the entire show as far as I'm concerned. Again, I'm not going to beat this horse to death, but his vocals, though, again, I mean, it's just a tease. You hear that guitar, you expect those Morrissey vocals to drop in, and Johnny Marr's voice, again, I love his voice on his own material, but for the Smiths material, it just falls flat. And it serves as evidence to me that whenever, and it's become popular nowadays because Morrissey is in the doghouse with a lot of the people that live in this world, especially the woke mafia, that people will say, Johnny Marr's a better singer than Morrissey anyway. It's bullshit. You know it's bullshit. You're just saying that. You're just saying that to virtue signal. You can't possibly mean that. That is one of the most ridiculous statements you can make, because you go into a song like This Charming Man, which is perfect, and just tease. Now, this is why, as much as I sort of root against the idea of the Morrissey-Marr reunion, because I don't want these guys to do anything that is a cash grab. I mean, I want these guys to continue to show the integrity that they've always displayed. But seeing Johnny Marr play these songs on the guitar and hearing Morrissey sing them in your head, you can't help but make sense why so many people are pining for this Morrissey-Marr reunion, because Johnny Marr is still on the top of his game, and I would make the argument that Morrissey vocally is still near the top of his game. I mean, I just saw him twice last year, and I mean, to me, he still sounds as good as he ever has. In fact, I think he sounds better now than he has in the last, few years before that. After that, he went into the song Somewhere, which is one of his, I think it's his newest single. I really like that song a lot. He made the joke after coming out of This Charming Man, which was just the height of snugness as far as I'm concerned. He made the joke that he's going to play a new song, but don't worry, this new song doesn't suck. Get it? That's a joke. 'Cause a lot of times people hear a new song, and for them that's a beer and piss break. This show didn't have a beer and piss break, by the way. This show was legitimate all the way through. Now, like I said, the issues I have with Johnny Marr singing the Smiths material, it's not personal. I love you, John. Greatest guitar player of all time, hands down, not even close. But nobody can sing that material. Nobody besides Morrissey can sing that material. Shouldn't even be allowed to sing that material in karaoke. That's why, going back to that album, The Ultimate Abortion by Boz Bohr, that's why it just irks me. Because nobody else can sing those songs. Especially the Smith songs. Now, I realize the Boz Bohr album was mostly Morrissey solo material. I get it. But man, it's a tease. After that, he played Walk Into the Sea, which I thought was really good. From there, he went into two Smith songs back to back. He did Please, Please, Please Let Me Get What I Want on the acoustic guitar, which was really nice, really beautiful. Now, as far as his vocal performance on the Smiths material, instrumentally, This Charming Man was the highlight of the show for me. But vocally, as far as the Smiths material goes, this was the highlight of the show for me because it was just him and an acoustic guitar and he destroyed it. And his voice is good. It's just not as good. You understand what I'm saying? Then he went into Headmaster Ritual, which, I mean, it's one of my favorite songs of all time. Meet His Murder is just, it's pretty much perfection as far as I'm concerned. So you really can't do a bad version of that song. Hearing him play that song instrumentally, again, all of the stuff that he played of the Smiths, he is still note perfect. Johnny Marr is still at the height of his game as far as I'm concerned. After that, he went into the song Get the Message by Electronic. Now, this was something that I sort of went into this show blind, as I mentioned before, and I was curious if he was going to do anything by Electronic. Now, Electronic, I like. It's not necessarily my favorite project in the world, because to me, Electronic is, and I'm a New Order fan, don't get me wrong. I like New Order. I thought that the pairing between Johnny Marr and Bernard Sumner was cool, but my issue with Electronic is I feel that Johnny Marr isn't really featured enough. I don't know that record necessarily did much for him as an entity, or that project, I should say. But I like the record. For what it is, I like the record. I feel like, and I'm a New Order fan, but I feel like the Electronic project was a little bit too much New Order and not enough Smiths. That would be my only real quibble. I wish it could have been more like 50-50, but I like the song Get the Message, and I like that Electronic record. After that, he played How Soon Is Now, and again, hearing Johnny Marr do that guitar intro himself is mind-blowing. How Soon Is Now is another one of those songs. Yeah, it's overplayed. There are songs in the catalog I would definitely take over How Soon Is Now, but I never really get tired of hearing How Soon Is Now, and it's the same thing. As I said before, I've seen Morrissey do the song How Soon Is Now a million times. I'm somebody, unfortunately, I never got a chance to see the Smiths because they broke up when I was 12 years old, and I was living in Mayberry at the time. But hearing Johnny Marr play this intro is amazing because when I've seen Morrissey do it in the past, every guitar player I've seen play this song with Morrissey, they get close. It's respectable. Morrissey wouldn't do it if it wasn't passable. Morrissey has a very strict quality control standard. I believe that. But to hear Johnny Marr play this song, it's unbelievable. Early Money, and after How Soon Is Now, he played Early Money, which I like that song a lot. He closed out the set with Getting Away With It, which is another song by Electronic. I don't love that song. I do like the song Get the Message. Getting Away With It was probably the weak point, as far as I'm concerned, of the actual set list, as far as the songs went. I don't love that song, honestly. I never really have. Like I said, I like the Electronic project, but as far as the Johnny Marr stuff, apart from the which I hate, Electronic, I don't go back and I don't really listen to that Electronic record very often. I should go back and listen to it again because I haven't listened to it in a while. It's sitting over there somewhere. Maybe I'll bring it to the channel on one of these Morrissey Marr Mondays. It's okay. I don't love that song, but I would take Electronic over the because I've said this before. The suck. If you're one of those people that loves the, and I know that they're out there. I've talked to people that think that the are the Jugs. I just don't get it, man. For the encore, he came out and he did his version of The Passenger by Iggy Pop, which was awesome. One of the high points of the show as far as I was concerned. But he closed out with There Is a Light That Never Goes Out. Whew. You talk about finding it hard to walk out of a building with a stiffy. I found myself in that predicament after hearing There's a Light That Never Goes Out, instrumentally at least. Again, I'll sort of make the same argument that I made when it comes to all of the Smiths material in the set list, that the voice just doesn't... It just kind of leaves you feeling a little bit, non-climax as far as I'm concerned. But I do love his voice. I thought the show was great. I thought that both bands were great. James was awesome. I thought Johnny Marr was awesome. He seemed to be having a good time. You never have to really worry about Johnny Marr being in a good mood or having a good time. That seems to be his former bandmates' issue. When you go see him live, it can be a gamble at times, although I've been fortunate in my experience seeing Morrissey over the years. I've seen one show in my dozen where I feel like Morrissey was sort of elsewhere in his mind. He wasn't necessarily in a bad mood, but you just kind of got the sense. I saw him in 2014 on the World Peace Tour, which was probably the weakest Morrissey show I've ever seen. And he was good. He's always good. You can't ever say he's not good. You say that, you and I are going to go outside, remove our shirts, and toss around fisticuffs. But you kind of got the sense that his head was elsewhere. I mean, you're in San Jose. It's hard not to imagine that you're somewhere else when you're in San Jose. But this show was great. You never have to worry about Johnny Marr being in a good mood. He is a pro. And his band is the Jugs, as far as I'm concerned. So I realize that this tour is still making its way around North America. So if they have not, as of yet, come to your neck of the woods, man, I would highly recommend that you check out this tour. Both bands were awesome. The set list for Johnny Marr was about as good as you would hope. I think he played about a third Smith songs. I could go down and count right now, but I'm not very good at math anyway. So it would be a moot point at best. The next day after that show, my dad came down and met us down in San Francisco, and he and I spent the day out in Berkeley, which is another one of my happy places. I am an Oakland guy. Now, I'm not from Oakland. I don't pretend to be from Oakland. I don't sell myself as being from Oakland, but I am an Oakland guy. I identify as an Oakland guy. I take a lot of pride in Oakland. As ridiculous as that may sound to you, it's true. I am an Oaklander at heart. When the day comes when I have enough decency to go tits up, plant me somewhere in Oakland and I will be perfectly happy. But the next day after the Johnny Marr show, my dad and I kicked around Oakland and Berkeley, checked out the Piedmont Cemetery in Oakland, which is something that I can't possibly recommend enough. If you are a cemetery nerd like I am, it is unbelievable. You go all the way up to the top tier of the Piedmont Cemetery. You can see both cities. You can see Oakland, San Francisco, both bridges and the bay. It is unbelievable. I realize, being a man my age talking about views, I sound as if I'm one of those 50-year-old men who has nothing better to do than sit around and watch his bird feeder. But I sort of resemble that remark. I enjoy my bird feeder quite a bit. Thank you very much. We headed over to Telegraph Avenue, which is one of my old stomping grounds. We're hoping to hit the Amoeba Records on Telegraph, which unfortunately is closed on Mondays and Tuesdays, apparently, which is probably better. I had spent some duckage at the Amoeba in San Francisco anyway, but we also went to one of my favorite bookstores in Berkeley, a place called Moe's. Now, you may not believe this based on the inarticulation on this channel, but I am a huge reader, and one thing I found at the Moe's in Berkeley is a book I'm very excited to read, How to Ruin a Record Label, the story of Lookout Records by Lookout Records founder Larry Livermore. Now, if you are from the Bay Area, or I guess you don't really even have to be from the Bay Area to have an appreciation for Lookout Records, this was pretty much the seal of quality as far as I was concerned. Back in the 1990s, of course, one of my favorite bands of all time, the Mr. T Experience, were on this record label. I, as of yet, have not cracked my copy of this book. Since my wife and I have been home from San Francisco, things have been very hectic around here. Another book, if you're interested in the Lookout Records story, which why wouldn't you be? Another book that I have read, a book I've had for a long time, is this book, Punk USA, The Rise and Fall of Lookout Records. To me, back in the 1990s, Lookout Records was basically the quality control seal that I always looked for. Everything that was out on Lookout Records back in those days, I was a fan of. I was just a huge fan of every band and every record that came out on that label. But later that day, my dad and I went to the Oakland Coliseum to check out one of the last ever Oakland A's games. This is not a sports show. I'm not going to turn this into a sports show. Can you imagine? To me, there's nothing more depressing than watching ESPN and watching a couple of withered old jocks sit around and rehash their glory days. So this is not a sports show. Don't want it to be a sports show, but my dad and I went to one of the last ever Oakland A's home games. The team is leaving Oakland at the end of this year, or I guess they have left Oakland now since the baseball season is over. It turned out to be emotional, a little bit bittersweet, more emotional than I expected it, honestly. I'm not really the hugest sports guy in the world, and as far as baseball is concerned, I'm sort of in a weird place with baseball because of the A's. Kind of broke my heart, to be honest with you. More sad for the city of Oakland, as I just mentioned before. I'm an Oaklander all the way. I feel bad for the city for losing their beloved team due to greed and grossness. But we got to go to one of the last ever Oakland A's games. Got to take my dad. It was awesome. The A's won, which is sort of immaterial at this point in time. I was just there to sort of take in the environment and the atmosphere at the Oakland Coliseum. One time, I will say this. There's an atmosphere at the Oakland Coliseum when it comes to A's games that is just authentic. It is unique. It is something that is distinctly Oakland. And the team is moving to Las Vegas. Now, I have nothing against Las Vegas. I enjoy visiting Las Vegas. But if there's one word that describes Las Vegas, it's not authentic. And as I was at this A's game on Thursday, I just couldn't help but think to myself, man, you're never going to recapture this essence in a place like Las Vegas. Anyway, it was great. It was great to be back home. To be honest with you, it was a little bit hard leaving California this time. The older I get, the older my peeps get out there in California. It's harder to live as far away as I do, but it was a great trip. Go see the Johnny Marr show. I do not think that you will be disappointed by it. He sounds great. He looks great. And James was on top of their game as well. Anyway, man, thank you so much for checking out this video. It's good to be back with you. This is Archaic Records. My name is Jamie, coming at you from Nashville, Tennessee. Be sure to go out and support your local record store, like Amoeba Records in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Berkeley. Also got a chance to hit up Melody Records in my hometown of Chico, California, another one of my happy places. Now, real quickly, I have to call out one of my favorite record stores here in this general geographic region, that being Hard Copies up in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Now, Hard Copies is a record store that I love. If you ever find yourself, for any reason, in Bowling Green, Kentucky, you have to go check out Hard Copies. Now, why you would end up in Bowling Green, Kentucky randomly, I don't know. It's about an hour from Nashville, so it's not too far out of the way for us to go up there and spend a day. But recently, they just announced on their social media networks yesterday that they had a listening party for the new Jelly Roll album, which I find to be somewhat disappointing. Can you imagine what the collective IQ would be at a Jelly Roll listening party? If you're unfamiliar with Jelly Roll, picture this in your head. Picture yourself thinking to yourself, you know what? I love Post Malone, but I just wish that he was morbidly obese. There you go. Jelly Roll. Current state of popular music is one that does not make me particularly happy. So, Hard Copies in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Gotta step up your game, son. That is not acceptable behavior. Anyway, check back most weeks for Morrissey Monday, a weekly celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths, as well as other record content and album reviews throughout the week. And I guess that's just about gonna do her. So until next time, my friends, talk to you then.